Voiceover Coffee Shop, Episode 6.
Welcome to the VoiceOver Coffee Shop, where we share our morning with some of the finest names in voiceover. And now, here's your host, voice actor Andrew Morrison.
Hi there. My name is Andrew Morrison, and welcome to the VoiceOver Coffee Shop, where we start our day with some of the finest names in voiceover. If you'd like to know more about me, feel free to visit my personal website at www.voicebard.com. Today, we're here to wrap up coffee with my dear friend, Dan Lenard. Dan has become a recognized industry home expert, co-host of VoiceOver Body Shop, and a founding member of the World Voices organization. In our previous episode, we talked about how Dan paved his path as a household name in the industry and the biggest myths in building a home voiceover studio. Today, we talk about the birth of VOBS, microphone techniques, judging your voiceover coach, and common problems he sees when audio is sent his way. So, how did the VoiceOver Body Shop come to fruition?
George Whittam and I have been friends for about 13, 14 years. We met 2008 would be 13 years. We met at Voice 2008 here in Century City in California, one of the first voiceover conferences. And I was at the first one that was in Las Vegas, at the Palace Station of all places, because OJ was arrested there like a couple of weeks after that. Suddenly got all these voice actors together in one place. On the opening night, we had a reception. Couldn't get us out of the room. I know you. I've talked to you. I've seen you online. That's great. Hi, I read your stuff all the time. What, you actually read the nonsense I write? That sort of thing. And it was great. They could not get us out of the room. And then there were presentations over the next 2 days, and I got to meet people like Don LaFontaine and Bob Bergen and some of the other prominent people in the business, and they were all excited to see all these people very interested in voiceover. And they did it again in 2008, and that time it was in Century City here in LA. And for some ridiculous reason, I decided to become an ambassador and become Jim Allberger's assistant, and he was the guy running the thing. And that didn't last long. And they put me in charge of producing the rooms, and I was in charge of this one room. And George, who was Don LaFontaine's engineer and the engineer to a number of other, the big boys, the big promo guys here in LA. And he comes in with this, this presentation about ISDN, and you got to have this processor and all these big, all the stuff that, since it's like, no, you don't need any of this stuff. And I'm sitting there watching this presentation, and I'm like, go running up to him, like, do you realize who it is you're talking to? You're talking to a bunch of beginners. You're going to scare the crap out of them.
Right.
And two, they're not going to understand a word you're saying. Let's go through this presentation real quick before people come in here, and let's take out the stuff that really isn't relevant. Mm-hmm. And we went there, and I said, if you do this way, people will kiss your feet. Now, you got to remember, I'm a professional educator. I know how to do these types of presentations, and he was a total noob at it. He was a great engineer and understood his stuff, but really didn't understand the presentation side of it. So we simplified it down. People came in, they were like, oh, this is fabulous, and we became friends, immediately. Which happens in the voiceover business. It's like, I got something in common with you, and that's really great. And he and I would talk on the phone every now and again, or we would get on Skype, and then somebody said, can you do a webinar for us on this? And I'm like, I should get George in on this. And we did a webinar on multi-track recording and some other stuff. And then we were talking, and we're like, why don't we do a podcast? This was 12 years ago. We're like, let's do a podcast. What a podcast was 12 years ago.
Right.
And I'm like, can we do it on video? Let's make it a TV show. And he's he's like, how do we do that? And we researched, and it took us about 3 or 4 months to really figure out how to do that. And, how to find the right software, how do you stream it? Now it's like Facebook Live, go, and YouTube Live. It's no problem getting to stream online for nothing.
Right.
But we decided let's do a show about home voiceover studios. And, and then one day we were talking on the phone. Hey, did you listen to Car Talk this morning on NPR? Yeah, I did. I thought that was great. And it just suddenly struck us like lightning. Why don't we make this show about like Car Talk and make it so people can call in and say, I got a problem with my home studio. Oh, because that's what people love to hear us do, is analyze what a problem is and troubleshoot it and say, well, here's how this is supposed to work. And, and that's really the way it should be done. So we were like, okay, we figured out how to stream it. We figured out how to do the video for it. And March 11th, we're going on the air, or at least we're going on the net. And we just started it and, publicized it on Facebook, and people started to watch it. We started to build an audience, and, and it was we did it on Sunday night, which my wife hated, and his wife hated, but, I was able to keep mine. It became our weekly mahjong game, essentially. It was what we would do every Sunday night, and trying to provide fresh content. And and then we started having guests on. We had Pat Fraley on, and Mark Cashman, and other prominent people. We had Tom Kenny on the show, and June Foray, and so I got to meet these people. It was
Right.
great. And we kept doing the show until I decided to move out here to California. And I'm like, well, look, we're gonna do it from California, and now we can do it together because you're in Santa Monica and I'm here, and now we in Sherman Oaks, and we can just build the studio here and do it here, which we immediately started to do. And then it's like, well, it can't be. But it was called East West Audio Body Shop back then, which I sort of alluded to with Car Talk. We're trying to make it like a car place. And then we changed it to Voiceover Body Shop because the joke is it's VOBS. And we just have a good time with it. I mean, George and I are great friends. We really enjoy, shooting the crap with what really is going on in the business. I have a lot of respect for his knowledge and his geekiness, and he respects my ability to try and communicate stuff so people understand it. And he was very sophisticated, and I was like, keep it simple. And we sort of came together and created this philosophy of, here's how it's supposed to be done. And, I mean, there's lots of variables, and those are the questions that people ask about. And usually it has to do with very specific equipment. And usually it's like, George is like, well, this is a great thing. This sounds really good, and you might want to. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. If it sounds good, it is good. And that's what we say at the end of the show. Hey, if it sounds good, it is good.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's about. And, just our ability to banter with each other. I mean, it's a totally unscripted show. We've got, Debbie Derryberry, we've got, we're getting agents and casting people on and really talking about what does it take to succeed in this business. And then what we do is we record the show live every other week. We do an hour interview with our guest, and then we're like, thank you for being here. When we stop, and we're like, okay, let's reset for Tech Talk. And then we do an hour of just us talking, and we alternate every week. So we have fresh material every week. And, we get about 10,000 views a month, and that's the webcast on our, on Facebook, on YouTube, on our homepage, VOBS.tv. And we have a podcast, and we get, we've, had over, almost 170,000 downloads of the podcast. So we're there. It's actually happening. I mean, we've been doing it it'll be our 10th year in a month and a half. So, March 11th, 2011 is when we started that. And so we're excited about that. We're probably going to do a compilation show of, the greatest and silliest moments on the show, because if it's not fun, why do it? I mean, that's the main reason we do it. It's because it's fun.
So with the Tech Talk, do you guys actually have people call in just like
We have them write in, they can do something, they can ask in the chat room.
Mhm.
We've got somebody monitoring the chat room, or they can email us at theguys@vobs.tv. And we go through the questions and we're like, okay, this is interesting. Okay, this is a doubled question, and that sort of thing. And we don't really go over the questions before the show. It's like they're in the show notes, and it's like, okay, here's one. And we just throw it out there to, and we're like, okay, well, what do you think about this? And what do you think? And
Yeah.
people love it, because we know how to analyze these things. These are the things that we do day in and day out, one person after another asking this question or that question. How does this work? And we keep it to the basics and draw people away from the sophistication and back into the idea that it is simple. And you're not supposed to overthink it. It's not about the technology. We make it about the technology, but it's about, if you don't know what something does and how it does it and when to use it, don't use it.
Right. Right.
We can set that stuff up, but what we really, the biggest issue we have is people says we got a buzz, or I got a hum, or somebody wrote to me and says, I've got an RF problem. I'm like, are you like hearing music through your audio, or is it like a buzz or a hum? Right. Until we hear it, we don't know.
Right.
If people have different ways of describing things. And I listened to some audio from somebody, and in 10 seconds, I know what's going on. The acoustics are wrong. They've got a ground fault somewhere. Their levels are too low. They're talking right into the microphone, stuff like that, or they're over modulating, or they're under modulating, that sort of thing. And, and the acoustics are wrong. It sounds like they're in a tube. So it's an auditory business.
Right.
And that's what we do, is we understand what it is what's it supposed to sound like. I came up with this acronym, WHISTLE, what it's supposed to sound like. And what it's supposed to sound like is, the idea is not to make you sound great. It's to make you sound like you, as you exist in a neutral environment, and how you're having a conversation, the way you and I sound right now, having a conversation to each other.
Right.
I'm not announcing to you. I'm not talking to 1,000 people. I'm talking to you. And that's essentially what voiceover is. And I think people get this, no, I'm in front of a microphone, I have to talk louder, which is why we keep seeing these specs. No, no radio guys, no announcers, none of that. But that's because people think that's what it's supposed to sound like. And it's like, no, it's not that at all. It's acting, it's taking on the persona of somebody, who am I, where am I, who am I talking to, why am I talking to them, that sort of thing. It really is.
Even in animation, people are wanting less charactery voices and more authentic, right, exactly.
Right. Depending on the, whatever the production is.
Right.
So, there's, it really, and there's so many different genres, and look at how much that's grown in the last 15 years. There's different types of animation. You've got anime, you've got, mainline funny animation. You've got, some of these, these sort of real drama life type animations. You've got e-learning, you've got audiobooks, you've got different types of commercials. You got people doing car commercials who think that's what's but not radio is. And, and then people who are like, can we talk about diarrhea? It's it's that sort of thing. It's just so many different things. And I think when people get in, they need to find what is their niche. Where is it that they fit into the into that, where do they fit in? Where do they excel? What are they getting hired for?
Right.
Sort of.
And not to say that they can't dabble into each and everything. I mean, generally most voiceover artists are going to have, like, if they do anime, for instance, they're going to do a commercial, or they're going to do a e-learning gig, or they're going to do an IVR gig somewhere. I mean, generally they find what they can do. Like you said earlier, the bottom line is the dollar. You've got to make it sustainable. And so however you can make it sustainable. But
if you don't like what it is that's going to make it sustainable for you, then it's probably not the right business for you.
Right. If it's not fun, why are you here?
That's right. If it ain't fun, why do it?
Right. Right. So with you doing audio, so with you treating home spaces, what is the biggest problem you see that causes reverb, and what is the biggest problem that you see that causes boxiness? Because those are two questions that I get asked about a lot.
Yeah, well, it's simply a matter of hard small spaces.
Mhm.
You've got to acoustically treat something to make sure that sound is absorbed. So if someone says, "I got a walk-in closet," I say, "You got a lot of clothes hanging in there?" Yeah, great. We just saved you $6,000 because you can go in a walk-in closet, close the door behind you, pretty much minimize the exterior noise, and nothing absorbs the sound of your voice like clothes. It's just the best thing. And if you talk into a rack of clothes, you suddenly realize there's no reflection off the walls.
Right.
Or if by chance, if you're talking underneath a shelf, it starts to sound like that. And so you don't want any hard surfaces. You want them, you need to have acoustical foam on there, or moving blankets or acoustical blankets, not covering the whole thing. You've got to have a little bit of liveliness. You don't want it sucking all the energy out of your voice.
Right.
I mean, I'm not even in my main booth here. I'm in my my control room, which I can record from because it's also acoustically treated in here. I'm mostly for the TV show. But if I go over to my booth and start talking to you through my Sennheiser 416 like this, you can hear there's a slight difference in the acoustics.
Right.
So if I walk back out here, the louder you talk, the more the room comes into play. So you're supposed to use your indoor voice when you're doing voiceover, because when you talk loud, suddenly you hear the rest of the room. And I think that's the problem that causes most of the reverb and boominess that we hear. And I've dealt with that a couple of times today with people who are like, "Sounds boomy to me." I'm like, talk quieter. You'll find that if you use your indoor voice, that it's not going to affect the rest of the room. You really don't want to have to think about that. All you really want to think about is what's in black and white in front of you, and forget the microphones there, because that's the biggest problem. I'm on microphone, which is why I tell people you don't need a pop screen, big black circle in front of them. It's a microphone. It's a very psychological thing. And once you can get that out of your head and really get into the copy, that's going to make you a better voice actor. See, it's not technology, it's technique.
Right. So with the louder you get, the more room you pick up. What about for like video game roles where people are like screaming, where it's in the black and white copy to scream at the top of your lungs?
Well, yeah, but the thing is you can pot yourself down when you do that so you don't overmodulate. But I can yell, and that's the way people sound like when they yell. They want it totally dead. The engineers can control it from the other end. That's not a big deal. Generally, you don't yell into people's ears.
Right.
You don't want to concentrate on the microphone. You want to concentrate on as I like to tell people, especially a lot of actors who are trying to get into voiceover because all the studios shut down out here. When you're doing a scene on camera, do you play to the camera? Unless you're doing the news or you're doing a commercial where you're looking into the camera. If you're like doing a dramatic type of thing, you play to the scene, not to the camera. And the same applies in voiceover. You don't play to the microphone. You play to whoever it is that you're talking to. And something that just people don't get. They think that it's something else, and it's not. It's having a conversation with somebody. And so it's important to understand not to overproject and to just be you. And that prevents a lot of those acoustical problems. But you can't do it in a small square space with no acoustical treatment. And you can't have
right.
Or you can't have hard surfaces around you. That's how you create the right environment to do this.
Wonderful. So where can people find you?
They can find me at a really difficult URL. Home
You can do
voice.
the radio announcer voice for it if you want.
Oh, it's homevoiceoverstudio.com. Homevoiceoverstudio.com, explains how I do what I do. At the bottom of my homepage is a specimen collection cup. Actual picture of a specimen collection cup. It says Home Studio Master. It's an actual, like what you would get when you go to the doctor.
Right.
You click on it. It's a Dropbox. Send me an unprocessed MP3 of your audio with some silence and you talking. I listen, and on 5-10 seconds, I'm like, oh, you got this problem, you got that. You're not using the microphone right. Your acoustics are wrong. How are you set up? What microphone are you using? I ask a lot of questions, something I learned in the life insurance business. Find out what it is that somebody is talking about. What is it that they want? What is their lifestyle? Are they sharing a closet with somebody? Does their spouse mind them being in a closet? Do you have a room in the house that you can convert to doing this? All these sorts of questions and things that people don't even consider. But because it's what I do every day, it's like, oh, well, this, that, the other thing. I got all the answers. I know all the questions. Nobody else does. So other guys tend to be audio engineers. There's a couple other guys in town that I know who are great friends and they're wonderful guys, but they're audio geeks. And they're like, well, you got to use an Apollo Twin. Why? Well, you got all these plugins. What do you need all the plugins for? Well, for compression and EQ and all that. Like, nobody cares. If you get it right physically, you don't need any of that stuff. I don't process my audio. It's what you hear right now is what I put out. That's my sound. That's what I am. That's what I have. My levels are right. My acoustics are right. My microphone technique is proper, so I don't have any plosives. That's all they're asking for. They're not asking you to be an engineer. They're asking you to be a voice actor. So what is it with all this stuff? Oh, I got to have isotope. I got to have, this. I get a declicker. We don't talk to people through compression, EQ, and a declicker. That's not natural. We don't talk half an inch from somebody's eardrum. Mic should be at ear height. How do people perceive you? Really listen to commercials and some of the stuff that you hear on radio and TV. Unless it's a car commercial, when it's just a tiny little bunch of people doing that kind of stuff, you're not going to get the work. People are going to think you're an announcer. I have that problem. I spent 15 years in radio. I was trained by the last great generation of radio announcers. And it's hard to break out of that sort of thing. And because I'm such an old geezer, I talk properly. I don't talk like a millennial. I can swear like one. I probably swear better than most people. But I tend to talk in a way that people can understand me. I'll use colloquialisms. But I don't talk at this rapid clip that people do today. And for some things that's good, other things it's not. And sometimes I have a hard time when they say, well, just make it sound really natural. And it's like, well, okay, I got to talk really fast. Unless, of course, you're doing like a tag on something. It's like, not available in Kansas City, that sort of thing. Not to bother the people in Kansas City. So, it really is a matter of just being you and not worrying about the technology. People can talk to me. They can talk to George. George and I are literally competitors, but we're not. It's a very symbiotic relationship.
Right.
He's got his high-end clients, the big boys who do promo, and he works with beginners. And I work with people who really have no idea what they're doing, even if they're experienced voice actors, of which we have many here in LA who always go into somebody's studio and don't really, when now they can't go into the studio, they've got to do it from home. They've got to do it what everybody else has been doing. It kind of bugged me when the studios all shut down and they're like, oh, we got to get everybody set up to do this. And they were throwing people all this equipment that they use in studios that have absolutely nothing to do with you recording in your closet. And it was really upsetting. And part of it was deliberate because they didn't want people to succeed at it. or they wanted people to sound the way they thought that they should sound using the equipment. Everything sounds the same, which I don't know how well that worked. I've heard stuff and I'm like, no, they're not matching the audio really well. And it's just what they know. And they don't realize that people are recording from home, and that all the equipment in the world doesn't mean diddly if you've got the wrong environment to do it in. 90% of the quality of your audio is really dependent on the acoustical properties of the room you recorded, and then the techniques you use to record in that room. Yeah, now I'm starting to sound like a college professor. It's sort of what I try to go for. I mean, I never, I got my master's, but I didn't go for my PhD. But I figure with all the people and all the studios I've built, I probably should have a PhD in this. Talk about a niche. It's a very narrow niche of reality here. I mean, there are a lot more. If you do a search on voiceover versus podcasting's got, it's like 10,000 more hits a day. It's voiceover is a very, very narrow niche, even though it seems like there's hundreds of thousands of people doing it. At least that's the way it looks like on Facebook.
Well, I mean, yeah, it does. But I mean, even in what was it, April of 2020? That was the most searched thing in April of 2020 was how to get into voiceover.
It was one of them. I'm sure. A good friend of mine is a real expert on the internet and studies this stuff. And he's like, now podcasting, there's other things. There's millions of hits on other stuff. Voiceover is not a top choice there. It may have been for a short time, but people have, I'll try. Oh, I have no idea how to do this. And they move on.
Well, that's the biggest thing, and that actually excited me because I saw a lot of microphones going on sale. But no, people
ain't the microphone, Andrew. I'm sorry to tell you.
Do what?
It's not the microphone. Don't.
No. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. No. I know it's not the microphone. I'm just saying. I saw equipment going on sale, and I said, "Oh, that's pretty, and it's really cheap right now." It wasn't necessarily for. It was for vanity.
Yeah. Nobody needs to see how the sausage is made. I'm sorry.
Right. But no, people would get into it, and they would realize that how much of a business it was, and then they would give up 3 months in.
Yeah, after investing, in voiceover academies and people teaching, and there's a couple of companies out there that are just complete shysters. I won't mention any names. And there's some legitimate companies out there, and there's some very good coaches, and then there's some very bad coaches.
Right.
It's fine because they try to teach them technology, and I always end up mopping up afterwards. They told you to do what? To use this. This is stuff from last century, which we can say in 2021. It's from the last century. You're not on the radio. You're just trying to be yourself, and they don't get it. And they tried to recreate you in their own image. That's not what voiceover is in 2021. It's a completely different entity.
Always judge a coach by their students, not by what they do.
Hey, that's right. Who are your successful students?
Right.
Will Lyman was my student. Oh, was he? When? In 1968? I mean, look and see what somebody's track record is, really. And what are their credentials for doing what they do? Just because someone says they're an expert in this particular genre doesn't make them an expert in it. May make them an expert in teaching it because they've been teaching it a long time. But actually doing it. I actually do what I do. I'm an actor, and I am also an engineer consultant.
Which I agree with that, but I also do believe that some people are better teachers than they are students, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
Which is why I wouldn't look at an animation coach and go, "Hey, what animations have you recently been in?" I would say, I wouldn't say, "Hey, what animations have you recently been in?" I would say, "What are your students doing?"
Yep. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Like I said, some people try to create their students in their own image, and forget that everybody's unique. Every voice is a snowflake. Which is the great thing about this business. What is it they're saying in the car business? There's an ass for every seat. It's there's something for everybody. But is there enough to sustain you as paying the bills and feeding your family? It's
Right.
kind of nominal. It's still a small cadre of people who really literally are making a living at it, and I know all of them by first name. Most of them. I mean, sometimes I'll look at agency rosters. I don't know who that person is. How do I not know this person? Why am I not on this roster? That sort of thing. Because they're not spending their time on social media. They're busy being voice actors. So, that's another thing. Anyway.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed learning about how Dan found his home in the voiceover world, founding some of the most well-known organizations and programs in the industry. Thank you, Dan, for lending us your ears and providing us with decades of knowledge to utilize in building our VO careers without the BS. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the VoiceOver Coffee Shop. For more information on guests, new episodes, and more, be sure to visit www.vocoffeeshop.com.